Erev Tov, everybody. Good evening. I just want to ask everyone, if you have not yet had the opportunity to silence your cell phone or any other device, I ask you to please do so at this time. And before I begin my prepared remarks, I want to recognize someone who is here tonight, Ann Dorsback. Ann is 102 years old, which is pretty amazing. And when Anne was a youngster, she lived through and experienced Kristallnacht. So having someone who lived through what we are here to commemorate adds a deeper layer of meaning and significance to our being here tonight. I'm Rabbi Beth Jackowitz-Chotner from Temple Shalom, and on behalf of myself, the board and members of Temple Shalom, my colleagues, the members of the Jewish Community Relations Committee, the students from St. Francis of Assisi and the High School of Jewish Studies, our vocalist, Gregory Raming, and our accompanist tonight, Louis Bailey, I thank you for being with us tonight as we stand together, sing together, and remember a dark night in Jewish history. Starting on November 9th and continuing into the 10th, synagogues burned throughout the night as citizens and firefighters passively stood by and watched. Shop windows of Jewish-owned businesses were shattered and looted. So were Jewish-owned hospitals, schools, and homes. Jewish cemeteries were desecrated. These events took place 85 years ago in Berlin, Austria, and parts of occupied Czechoslovakia. However, we gather tonight because we must not forget what happened. We must remember the past. For in the famous words of philosopher Greg Santayana, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Synagogues and Torah scrolls were burned, and shattered glass littered the streets for as far as the eye could see. But that is not all that was destroyed that night. For the Jews in these cities, their sense of security and belonging was also shattered. They were in a state of shock and disbelief, not able to comprehend what had happened. Their sense of belonging and connection to their country, the place where they and their families were born and had lived for decades, was also shattered. The country for which they, their husbands, brothers, fathers, grandfathers, uncles, and cousins had fought, was no longer a safe place to be. And what about their non-Jewish friends and neighbors? How could they have turned a blind eye? Relationships were shattered permanently that night. And what about a future? Could they even think about having a future in their own homeland? The fear, the terror, the destruction, the betrayal, the despair. There are no words to adequately describe the horror of that night and the horror of the years that followed. The night of broken glass marked the beginning of the end of Jewish life in Europe, a life, an existence that had spanned centuries. May we never forget that horrific night, and may we all do our part to bring more shalom, peace, more shlemut, wholeness, to this shattered world. I will conclude my remarks with a poem written by Rabbi Karen Bender entitled "The Glass." I am the glass, once clear, smooth, perfect, protecting the store, the home, the eyes. I am the glass, shattered now, broken, sharp, dangerous. I am the book, once a source of peoplehood, philosophy, and learning, inspiring the mind, the spirit, the person. I am the book, burning now in a flame of hate, a precursor to the fate of a community. I am the synagogue, once the house of learning, the house of prayer, the house of gathering. I am the synagogue, aflame now, the end of an era of safety in Europe. I am the rabbi, once a teacher, a leader, a dignified transmitter of Torah. I am the rabbi, humiliated now on the streets of Germany, forced to choose between desecrating the Torah and surviving the night. I am the child, once carefree and innocent, laughing, playing, free. I am the child, terrified now as they take my father away, shaken by an evil in this night. I am the glass, repaired now by a people that will never give in, a window into a future of hope, of goodness and peace. I am the glass.
Good evening. 85 years ago, on the evening of November 9th, 1938, the Nazis unleashed a horrific and unprecedented assault on the Jewish communities of Germany and the newly acquired territories of Austria and the Sudetenland. With ample cooperation from members of the local population, the Nazis pronounced their hatred into the world with unimaginable fury. Untethered to judicial consequences and fueled by years of propaganda and fear, rampaging mobs were set loose into Jewish communities all across the newly forming German Empire. They fell upon their victims with a violence that was unique and absolute in its heartlessness and brutality, for it was aimed not randomly, but at individuals who had just a short time prior been considered fellow citizens, neighbors, or friends. Over a period of 2 days and evenings, over 100 Jewish men were killed, and hundreds more were injured. More than 1,000 synagogues were burned down. 7,500 businesses were destroyed. Cemeteries were desecrated, and 30,000 Jewish men and boys were arrested and sent to concentration camps. As the flames of their arson fires blossomed into the night sky, German fire brigades and police officials stood by and did absolutely nothing, because nothing that was occurring on these evenings was considered illegal, criminal, or unjust. None of the terror was cause for shame. It was, in fact, quite the opposite. The citizens of the newly minted Reich witnessed the destruction they were creating with a profound patriotism and pride, in a dynamic which would foreshadow the heart-wrenching darkness of the Holocaust itself. Those whose hearts held the hate which had brought Kristallnacht to life, those whose hands had held the rocks and torches, they believed they were the victims, and that on this night they were seeking justice. And the Jewish people, the men and women and children whose homes were being looted and burned, whose bodies were being beaten and incarcerated, the Nazis and their collaborators believed that they were the perpetrators, instigating by their very presence a threat which was answered on this night by madness and flames. By 1938, just 5 years after the declaration of the chancellorship of Adolf Hitler, the world was turning upside down. The prelude to this had occurred months before. On October 28, 1938, over 17,000 Jews of Polish descent, many of whom had been living in Germany for decades, were arrested and expelled by the Nazi government. They were deported to the Polish border. They were denied entrance by the Polish government, and thousands of now stateless and homeless Jews began to gather in a vast no-man's land between the countries. Hastily set up internment camps were nothing more than open-air cages, where condemned once prosperous and thriving families were sentenced to live behind barbed wire in ditches, pigsties, and cornfields. 17-year-old Herschel Greenspan was living in France. News of his family's expulsion from Germany and of their struggle to survive unhoused in the wheat fields of a Polish winter arrived to him in the form of a postcard from his sister. It seemed to release the brakes of an inner rage. Traveling to the German embassy in Paris on November 7th, he confronted Nazi diplomat Ernst von Röhm. In the name of his family and the 17,000 other Jews living in the Polish wilderness, Greenspan shot him 5 times. Critically wounded, von Rath died 2 days later, on November 9th. The assassination provided the Nazis with the excuse they needed to launch a wave of violence against German Jews. Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels called for a show of justice from the German people. The events were to appear to be spontaneous and unorchestrated, an outpouring of German national pride and patriotic vengeance. In reality, the government would provide the organization, the choreography, and the inspiration. In reality, the government would, the raw material for the violence the evening would demand. Its madness and rage, however, was not a commodity which the state needed to supply. It was freely donated by thousands of German citizens who answered the Nazi call for vengeance. An organized massacre of Jewish people has for ages been defined as a pogrom. The events of November 9th and 10th were exactly this. The Nazi pogrom of 1938 has come to be known as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. It gained this name at the hands of the perpetrators who created its terror, defending the event against an initial but rare and soon-to-be-forgotten expressions of outrage. High-ranking Nazi official Walter Funk declared with cruel and sarcastic understatement that the evening had been nothing. It was just a night of broken glass. It was not just glass which had been broken. Houses of worship had been obliterated. Cemeteries had been desecrated. Centuries of lives and livelihoods had been ended or destroyed. Childhoods had been left behind. The flames of the Shoah had leapt against the night sky, their light flickering to reveal the first real glimpses of the evil and indifference which was soon to consume and define an entire empire. Despite the Nazi name, it was not just storefront window panels that had fallen away on those early November nights. It was the entire presence of the Jewish people in Europe which had begun to shatter. Kristallnacht was meant to be witnessed. In its light, the Nazis would gauge how the world and its own citizens would react. And the world did see. Individuals and nations could have acted in defiance of the evil. They could have spoken out against the injustice. They could have opened their borders and hearts in embrace. But most did nothing. Most stood in silence. Absent in their indifference or vocal in their support, they left Jewish families alone to sweep broken glass off the streets, streets that would, in only a few years, lead to Poland and to Auschwitz and to Treblinka, streets that still wind their way through the killing fields of modern-day genocides and to a hate which finds ways, even today, to rekindle itself in the minds of those who do not take time to guard their hearts. 85 years ago, after the glass stopped shattering and fires stopped burning, the darkness of 1,000 nights descended upon Europe. We know this darkness. We have been called to defy it before, tethered to one another and to our faith, guided by a compass which points always in the direction of Kristallnacht's eternal truths. We are called to be realistic about dangers, but never to despair. Let our prayers reveal the strength of the ties which bind us always to hope and to perseverance, and let us never forget that we were born to prevail. It will be in the love that we pour out for one another and for all who fall victim to hate, and in the resolve we have for discerning justice and truth, that we will heal the world and ourselves.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for being here to show our solidarity with the memory of the Holocaust and Kristallnacht, with the Jewish community here in Louisville, and in a deeper way, with the people of Israel that are commemorating this horrible event all over the world. The Holocaust attacked Jews in many ways, not only physically. The most evident way that it attacked us was the physical way. A third of the Jewish world was murdered. 2/3 of European Jews were murdered. And the most important and creative center at that time of Jewish life was destroyed. But the Shoah was also an attack on Judaism, not only on Jews. And one of the highlights of this attack was on Kristallnacht. The Nazis tried always to do humiliating things to Jews and to attack Jews on Jewish holidays and Jewish festivals. Most of the deportations from the different ghettos into death camps happened when it was a Jewish holiday, a Jewish festival. They tried to attack our faith, our understanding of our covenant with our God, our understanding of God's role in history and our faith. We see ourselves as the chosen people. They try to make us less than human. It was an attack on the Jewish idea of chosenness, on the Jewish idea of God being part of our history, and on the Jewish messianic idea that all the Jews will be gathered one day and will see redemption in Zion. Instead, they gather the Jews in order to send us to death camps. The final solution is not only a final solution to the Jewish problem, it was a final solution for what Judaism stands for. And it all started on Kristallnacht. It was the trauma of seeing Torahs not only burning, but also seeing Torahs rolled on the streets and kids walking or biking on them. It was a horrible humiliation that Jews never experienced. Christians burnt Talmuds, rabbinical literature. They never burnt Torahs, they never desecrated Torahs because it was also sacred for them. It was not sacred for the Nazis in Germany and its surrounding. They wanted to create for us a world that is different than the Torah. Our Torah is a Torah of life. It says in the Torah, "Uvacharta b'chaim," you should always choose life. Instead, they wanted us to choose death. My teacher of Holocaust studies of blessed memory used to say he was a Holocaust survivor that survived Auschwitz. He said, "We received the Torah in Sinai and we gave it back to God in Auschwitz." That was a success to what the Nazis wanted to be. But the people of Israel overcame that horrible time and went into rebuilding. And we created, among other things, the two most important centers in Jewish history and the two most successful centers in Jewish history. We have the wonderful, miraculous state of Israel in the land of Israel, and we have the American Jewish community, which is the strongest Jewish community in Jewish history outside of the land of Israel. On every Jewish synagogue in our land here in North America, we have two flags. We have the American flag and we have the Israeli flag. Those are symbols of Jewish Renaissance, of us overcoming the trauma of the Shoah. It's no wonder that you see now, when we're facing another trauma, the slogan Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live, all over any social media. If Auschwitz was a myth of the victory of evil and the worst part of human nature, then the state of Israel is a victory that Am Yisrael Chai, that the fate of Israel and the people of Israel will always live. And Zionism is not only creating a safe haven for Jews from all over the world, it's also pushing back against the Nazis' attack not only on Jews, but also on Judaism. In a very different way, with no comparison whatsoever, we are feeling these past 30-something days, again an attack not only on Jews, but also on Judaism. The massacre that the terrorists of Hamas did in the 22 communities next to the Gaza border were not only an attack on Israelis, it was not only an attack on people living there, it was an attack on Jews all over the world, and it was an attack on Judaism, and actually an attack of what it means to be a human being, an attack on humanities. The Hamas was not trying to conquer territory. They knew that they will never stand against the power of the Israeli Defense Army. What they were trying to create is terror. They were not attacking soldiers, they were attacking civilians. They murdered and tortured babies and children and women and elderly, and they filmed it and they put it proudly on social media in order to create terror, in order to show us that they are attacking not only Jews and Judaism, but also our trust in humanity. It's not only a crime against humanity, it's something deeper than that. But just as we overcame a much bigger tragedy, the tragedy of Kristallnacht and the Holocaust, our answer to that will be again rebuilding who we are. We'll see a Jewish Renaissance, hopefully soon, and we will prevail. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you.
You have the translation of this piece in your program. I'll only be doing one verse. I'll be doing it in the German. About 10 years ago, when a Cantor's Assembly mission to Germany, I sang this piece in German, in Dachau. You'll notice at the end of every stanza, there's a statement, be a man, comrade, stay a human, comrade. Do a good job, get to it, comrade, for work will set you free. Those of you may recognize the German, Arbeit macht frei, which of course the Germans used in a disingenuous and intentionally hurtful way to say, oh, if you just work hard, it'll make you free. In a sense, what Herbert Zipper and Yura Seufer are saying in this song is they're turning the phrase back around. They are reappropriating that phrase and saying the only way that they could possibly survive this horror is by using their minds to write these pieces. They wrote them in their heads. They didn't have paper and pens to do this with. They memorized and created this music. This isn't the only piece they wrote in Dachau. And memorized it because they felt that if they didn't keep their minds working to create life and to create music, that they could not survive. And of course many, even though they did such things, did not survive. But Herbert Zipper, thank God, did. Stacheldraht mit Tod geladen ist unsere Welt gespannt. Drauf ein Himmel ohne Gnaden sendet Frost und Sonnenbrand. Fern von uns sind alle Freuden, fern die Heimat, fern die Frauen, wenn ihr Sturm zur Arbeit schreiten, Tausende im Morgengrau. Doch wir haben die Losung von Dachau gelernt und wurden stark dabei. Sei ein Mann, Kamera, bleib ein Mensch, Kamera, mach ganze Arbeit, pack an Kamera, denn Arbeit, Arbeit macht frei.
Good evening. My name is Ellie Keeley-Fine. I'm a member of the class of 2024 at St. Francis of Assisi School. At my school, grade 8 students are called to spend the first half of their year journeying through the history of the Holocaust. Like so many students before us, we have done the same. In our work of learning and of remembrance, we have found already that the Shoah's wisdom has written itself across our hearts. It has asked us to do and to be many things. But foremost is the calling it makes to my peers and I to hold our Jewish neighbors in our hearts as brothers and sisters. I speak tonight amongst family as I reflect upon the lessons which Kristallnacht has brought into our lives. During Kristallnacht, people like me and my peers stood by and did nothing as they watched their Jewish neighbors being placed into the crosshairs of an unprecedented prejudice and hate. To witness this, to know that our faith teaches us to do the exact opposite, feels like a wound. But from this place of pain, we have seen with clarity what we need to do if we are to not become the same. Unlike those who were silent or invisible, we are resolved to listen to the call that our faith and our common humanity makes to us, to never respond to the pain of our neighbors with silence, absence, or indifference. The eyes of our hearts must be open. Our voices must be ready to speak for those who can't speak, and to say the things which will pronounce justice in this world. Our arms must be raised, not against our neighbors, but in outreach, so that we can do the work of the heart which brings hope and healing to those who bear wounds. Our feet must be ready to walk with everyone who must journey in the dark places which lie outside of the compassion and caring of others. In all we do and say, in the prayers we say, in the promises we keep, we understand that we are called to create a refuge for those who need healing, family, and hope. As if we had stood on the sun, that part of our lives which allowed us to be indifferent to the suffering and pain of our Jewish brothers and sisters, has been burned away by what we have learned about Kristallnacht. We are resolved to defy hate with love. The violence of Kristallnacht calls us into the deepest wisdom that humanity has to teach. We believe that the Shoah and the Night of Kristallnacht offers to anyone who would enter into it unique and powerful opportunities to be and to become the light which will forever stand against hatred's darkness. My generation has been asked to carry forward the remembrance of the Holocaust and Kristallnacht. We have been asked to never forget who resides in our heart as family. To our Jewish brothers and sisters, we say, Anu bruchim shinikrinu ashad behaiv shel zi ul hakir ishad et hazini ke mispacha. Bota mida anu im vorshim la asot et ha avodah shel ripu ha olam yashed. Ha avara sheyesh lanu le'el shebara et kolanu veha ava yashit heya zi les tazar vehvadi lazar lanu ulkobel et ha omitz va hokach she anu chunu. Tis rochim kade lasot et had avodah asor bimyo chad hayom. We are blessed to have been called into each other's lives and to know each other as family. We are equally blessed to do the work of healing the world together. The love we have for the God who made all of us and the love we have for each other will surely help us to get the courage we need to do this work, especially today, especially in these challenging times. That is part of what Kristallnacht has taught us. Shalom.
Good evening. My name is Noah Chodner, and I'm a member of Temple Shalom. Now, for the first time in my life, anti-Semitism is on the rise. It is all around us in our everyday lives. Growing up as a Jewish teenager in the world today, it's very terrifying. Every day, I'm afraid of what might happen, especially when I'm in a synagogue or another Jewish location. It breaks my heart how I don't feel safe wherever I go. If I wear my Star of David necklace, anybody could detect that I am Jewish. That puts my safety at risk. I wish that life wasn't so complicated and that Jews could feel like we could have a safe place in the world. This all has a negative impact on the Jewish community as a whole. It is true that history is repeating itself. I'm the only Jewish kid in my grade at school, and sometimes this makes me feel alone. At my school, Judaism doesn't normally get the representation that I think it deserves. The closest we've gotten to learning about the Holocaust at my school is when we read the Diary of Anne Frank in 7th grade. The kids in my grade are not very educated when it comes to the Holocaust. If we had more education in schools about the Holocaust, there could be a decrease in anti-Semitism and more acceptance of Jews. Tonight, we remember the tragedy that happened 85 years ago, and I pray that during my lifetime, peace and acceptance will come to us all.
One week after Kristallnacht, President Franklin Roosevelt denounced Nazi Germany's terror attack and said, quote, "I myself could scarcely believe that such things could occur in a 20th century civilization." As Rabbi David said, the attacks that we saw then and attacks that we see today are not just attacks on Jews, they're attacks on Judaism. And I believe that is because Judaism is a fundamentally optimistic religion. It's a you have to be fundamentally optimistic in order to believe in the face of such difficulty that good can come out of it. You have to be fundamentally optimistic as a religion, as a people, to name your national anthem of your country, Hatikva, the hope. You have to be fundamentally optimistic when over and over again life has been proven difficult, and yet you keep coming to synagogue, and yet you keep singing, and you keep dancing. And there are certainly things to be optimistic about, even when it feels the most difficult. I feel optimistic when I hear these amazing young people speak here, offering their support of our community and their recognition of what is going on around them. I feel optimistic when I saw the Brandenburg Gate, which if you had said in 1939 that the Brandenburg Gate would be lit up in the year 2023 with the flag of the Jewish state in support of Israel, people would have said, "You have lost your mind," that could never happen in a million years. And so yes, things are hard. It can feel hard right now. But we as Jews, we respond to that hardship and we respond to that nihilism with tikva, with hope, with recognition that we believe that there is possibility of a brighter future. In a moment, we are going to say the Kaddish together, the prayer that we say in mourning. And even that prayer, the prayer that we say in memory of those who have died, it concludes with the words, Oseh Shalom bimromav, may the one who makes peace in the high places bring peace to us here on earth. Even our prayer that we say in the moments when we remember a loved one who is no longer with us is a declaration of our essential belief that peace will come, that tomorrow will be better than today. And these days, it's hard to always know that tomorrow will necessarily be better than today. It's not necessarily an idea that every day will be better than the next, but in the words of another great philosopher and speaker, Martin Luther King, though the moral arc of the universe is long, it bends towards justice. That fundamental optimism that he had, even in the face of all that he faced, is the same fundamental optimism that I believe that we must all carry forward, because that is what will continue to bring us together as Jews and as people, and that is what will bring us forward into tomorrow. I invite you to rise as you are able. You can find the words to the Kaddish in your program. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו amen. Thank you. You may be seated.
evening, everyone. I'm Matt Golden from the Jewish Community Relations Council. I'm honored to be here with you tonight, and as we conclude our evening, our chair from the JCRC, Beth Solomon, our committee leader, Jessica Loving, and I want to thank a few people. I first want to thank Rabbi Beth Chotner, who brought us into her house for this night. I want to thank the Louisville Board of Rabbis and Cantors, especially Rabbi David, Rabbi Freed, Cantor Azanek, Sharon Hordes, and Cantor Lip for making this night wonderful. But even more so, I want to thank Fred Whitaker. I want to thank the kids from the St. Francis of Assisi School and the High School of Jewish Studies who continue to show up at nights like these. It's important that these kids and their amazing teachers like Mr. Whitaker and those teachers at HSGS keep this memory alive from year to year. We're making the handoff to them. But the most important people that I want to thank tonight are you. It means so much that everyone is here, and for a very particular reason, because I want to make an ask of you before this night concludes. One of the things that I've always found so troubling about Kristallnacht is to think of what the Nazis learned from the Night of Broken Glass. The Nazis learned that they could burn synagogues. The Nazis learned that they could burn businesses, that they could murder and imprison and terrorize with impunity. That's what the Nazis learned. Why did they learn it? Because no one fought back. Very few people raised a voice, and complacency became the norm. Because of that complacency, the Nazi terrorists became emboldened. In the short days after the Night of Broken Glass, the Nazis passed a number of laws and taxes to further terrorize and subjugate. And other than the American president at the time, and a very few voices in America, very few voices around the world denounced that terrorism. And in places around the globe, those attacks were actually celebrated. Here in our own country, influential influencers like Charles Coughlin stepped into the silence to actually blame Jews for their own victimization. And from that complacency and silence, people learned that terrorism could be successful. So I would say that tonight we remember Kristallnacht not only for the brutality and the destruction, but also to remember that without people who are willing to stand up against terrorism and stand up loudly, a night like Kristallnacht is subject to repetition again and again and again. Anti-Semitism is on the rise today. Noah said it. We heard her voice. Ann Dorsbach, who's right here, 102 years old, who survived Kristallnacht, and in her lifetime saw the synagogue in Berlin burned and saw it firebombed again not more than a couple days ago. Here in our country, and in France, and in Russia, and in China, anti-Semitism is practiced openly, and it's accepted, and it's even justified. Influencers step into that silence to celebrate again. But one of the greatest messages that I think you heard tonight was from Rabbi Freed, who said there's hope in that space. There's hope in that space. Because what is the bulwark against that hate? It's you. You're the hope in that space. That's why I'm glad you're here. That's why I want to thank you for being here, because showing up and standing up is so important. By fostering dialogue, by embracing diversity, by celebrating differences, and by being present in uncomfortable spaces, we build a community that lasts and a living testament to the lessons of the past, like Kristallnacht. So, I told you I was going to make an ask, but I'm actually going to make two. As you go out into the night tonight, I'm going to ask you to do two things. First, remember the humanity of the victims of Kristallnacht. They were humans. They were humans like Anne, who's right here in the room with us. Let's remember that they were mothers and children and fathers and sons, and they were all terrorized by people. Their lives still have meaning. Second ask and the last ask for tonight. Don't be complacent. Don't be silent. Even when it seems that the voices of anger and vitriol are screaming the loudest, ask somebody if you can help them. Stand up. And the kids that are in this room, are carrying that today. We put that mantle upon them to be able to stand up in uncomfortable spaces. We, as the elders in the room, owe the kids to lead by example. So again, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you and give you a good night of Kristallnacht. I'm sad that we're together for this memory, but I'm happy to see you here. So thank you and good night.